Welcome everyone. This is the meeting in public, the Board of Directors of the London Ambulance Service. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Just Karen Brogan.
We should have Mark and hopefully Ronald on the screen. Welcome. Any declarations of interest?
The new declaration chair, I've been appointed as a visiting professor at the University of Cambridge.
And we very much congratulate you. Well done. Professor John.
Professor of Paramedic Science.
Well done. Well done. Anything else on there? If not, we go to the minutes of the last meeting. Please sing out if there's anything. Page 3, page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Anything at all? If not, we go to the action log, then outstanding actions. Patient storage, we go to that. Please, John.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to introduce Jessica. She's our learning and disabilities and vulnerability specialist, an occupational therapist by background. We've heard a patient story which included some videos of carers who were part of this story in our private section. The reason we weren't hearing there is because there's still an ongoing coroner's case. Before we report in public for Jessica to outline generically unidentifiable the learning that we took from that and a brief overview of the case.
Thank you. Yes, so as John said, we heard about a patient who was a person who was an autistic person and they had a learning disability and they were relying on support from their support staff to advocate for their health needs and to contact our service if they needed us. So this person had a decline in their presentation in their health and their support staff did contact our service. And during that time, they were in contact with us in both our 1s service and in our 9s, and also sought support from their GP as well. Later, we attended to the patient, and unfortunately, on conveying them to hospital, they were declared as deceased. So we really did want to have a think about what, as a service, we wanted to understand from that scenario, and in recognising the assurance process that we've already been through. Actually, the calls and when we attended to them, we followed the process appropriately. Apologies. Make that stop. However, actually, what we want to understand is individually each call being attended to appropriately. Actually, how was it that our processes and procedures support people who have a learning disability or are autistic people to access our service in the same way as everybody else? And actually, are we able to provide that personalised service that people need, particularly when they have a learning disability or are an autistic person? And understanding that people's presentations can be different and don't necessarily fit into the same questions and reasoning and clinical understanding that we have of people as a whole.
And are you able to tell us how many people live in London?
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of the numbers that we have of people who live in London with a learning disability are from 2019-2020, and we have around 40,000, just less than 41,000 people, specifically with a learning disability. We don't have those numbers for autistic people. But similarly, we also know that last year, May to May, we had just under 16,000 people that we as an ambulance service saw who have a learning disability and autistic people. But as part of those numbers, they're primarily around the people who have a learning disability and autistic people are significantly underreported in our reporting, which is recognised throughout the community as well in terms of diagnoses.
And you gave us a statistic in the private board, the national statistic.
Did, yeah. So the national statistic is 49% of people with learning disability who pass away die prematurely and from avoidable causes. And by avoidable, we mean if people have received good quality, timely health care. So for us as an ambulance service, actually the timely part is really important in recognising when somebody is unwell and getting them the health care they need at that time. In London, that is 48%. So we're at the very high end of the national conversation. And actually, in terms of being able to change and understand that statistic, that has gone up since last year. Last year it was 39%, so it has increased.
Yes. So for this group of 41,000 individuals living across London, we're very keen to improve our care. We're the first ambulance service to appoint a specialist in learning disabilities and autism, and sort of the role that Jess holds. We published a strategy on this last year, and we've just started Tier 1 Oliver McGowan training, which is specifically focused on this for members of staff across the organisation. It's a e-learning package. It's a recommendation that see across the organisation. In terms of the story we heard, there's clearly some learning about how we this group of individuals who call who've got these vulnerabilities, how do we recognise that at the point of call, and how do we make sure that if we've got a call handler either in our 111 system or our 999 systems got a concern, who they can raise it with a clinician who can also that out. So I think that's definitely a recommendation we'll be looking into. We'll be taking this case forward and considering how our triage systems work. But very happy for us to answer questions. Talk about all coming as well.
And you'll be reporting back to the next board on the outcomes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. And thanks again, Jessica, for bringing that forward. Obviously, about many lessons there. Provoked a great deal of in-depth discussion about this session. Thank you.
Thank you. The support staff really appreciate being able to share that story.
Testimony of Francis and Louise. It's very good. Thank you. Very question. If not, very much so. For that, we move on. Move on to the next item, which is my report. I did do a written one this time because having been off with an injury for a while, I hadn't done very much. Now, but since then, I've done quite a lot. Since the time the report was required. Strategically, ICS meeting North West London, meeting with the North East London ICS chair, and we are meeting the South East London ICS chair a couple of weeks, and also Southwest, the newly appointed Southwest London ICS chair. I'm meeting with him on that sort of strategic front. I've been out to visit Westminster, Bromley and Greenwich. Really interesting discussion staff there. Very open as usual, very direct. A lot of good points around the team working, even from places that initially may have had some scepticism. I felt that there was a lot of positivity. Everywhere I spoke to the cleaners, and universally very happy in LAS. Really happy. Not only as far as the London, but having it being appreciated and being part of the team. So really well done for doing that. Obvious discussions around response issues, handovers, things such as that. Interestingly, in Westminster, of course, that wasn't that much of an issue. Now, I did a visit to some areas in and out, absolutely, very, very smooth. And I saw a superb operation with one of our APPs in charge. APP? It's an advanced practitioner, paramedic practitioner. Got it, right. And I've been learning about CTMs and SSMs and LGMs. And I think it's all the same. And the technicians. And I've been saying to them, tell me please again exactly what you do. What's the difference between those roles? Anyway, but it was superb to see a combined job with LAS and Met Police. They were extremely good place, and to be taken through by this advanced practitioner paramedic, exactly what happened, the risks involved in this job about someone who was suffering quite bad, for example. I thought was absolutely superb. But again, St Mary's very smooth, very easy, in a bit of a contrast to the other places that we go to. I pulled into EOC and the top, when I went into the top, I think it was about 8 hospitals available to get that time. Yeah, it was just really operation centre. Yes, sorry, yeah. And that was again really interesting to the calm, smooth way this was going. Equally, when I called in another hospital, there was a waiting almost pre-cohort, which I thought was quite interesting, talking to our staff there about the challenges that we face. I'm going back to the QEH tomorrow, catch up with the chief exec, and I'm meeting the chair of Kingston, and she's the joint chair of Kingston and Hammersmith and Richmond. Hounslow and Richmond, thank you. And QEH is really. Yes. Thank you for adding that. I do agree. It is a public meeting. You're quite right. Anyway, I'm going back to those places tomorrow, just to talk through a number of issues that discussions. teams, and I'll be feeding back individually some of the feedback that I've been getting from the frontline staff. Just to finish with, what really impressed me when I was talking to them was how many times they said, I've discussed this with Dan, I've discussed this with John, I've talked to them about it. Really interesting, about how accessible the top team is. And the way they felt very confident about having quite interesting and challenging discussions about issues within the service. I came away feeling that was very, very powerful, very, very positive. They're giving the team a lead. Any questions from me?
In terms of as you interacted, what are the messages for everything they wanted us to be absolutely aware of, or things they wanted us to address?
It's quite interesting. There's a number of things with exec, around use of volunteers, state, availability of vehicles. There's a number of things which are, to be honest with the board, I often have to, quite frankly, explain exactly what the board does. Because for as far as frontline staff, so there's something which are immediately obvious. But there is something that they do appreciate visits, they do appreciate visibility. They are very open, very direct. So, and I found it a really, really good way of, it's our version of wall to wall, isn't it? It's walking the floor, talking to people, finding out the things that we talk about here, what's it actually like to people on the ground. And I found that extremely useful. But I've got a whole range of things on my list about the role of technicians, handovers, say in the states, blue light courses, complaints investigation. There's a whole lot of things. That's the sort of things which I was required very much towards the exec. But as I say, I think there's something we haven't really picked up yet, but we're going to talk about involving Neds in visits if they want to do that, appreciating the huge challenges of time. But I do find it's a really, really good way of finding out what's going on, and it's really good. So, any other questions for me? If not, thank you very much, and we go over to you.
So I've got to do an equity report. I'm terribly sorry. Otherwise, we're going to have to pick me up all my admin too. Right. So since we met, an awful lot has happened in LAS. So I've got quite a long report. So it begins with the coronation of Charles I, where on a very wet day, an awful lot of people of us kept a lot of people safe in London. And so I'd like to say thank you to everyone who was involved with that. I spent the day shadowing Swan, who's one of was a bronze commander on the day. So we spent a long time walking all around St James Park, talking to lots of people and making sure all was well. So thank you to Pete, he was a great person to shadow. So on industrial action, I'm really happy to say that Eulson voted to accept the government's pay supplement. People are going to get their pay rise in their June pay packet, and for us, that's the end of the industrial action. We clearly still responding to when other parts of the NHS have industrial action. But I'm really proud of the way everyone in LAS pulled together during our industrial action to keep people safe. In the demand and performance section of my report, most of it will be covered by John, the Deputy Chief Executive report. I've mentioned in the text about the data reporting issue, so the report should now be on the Trust website, so we'll do that after this report. The other events, we have the London Marathon, and for the first time, so we always have a very big role in making sure the London Marathon is safe, but for the first time this year, we ran 6 treatment centres, which we've never done before, and I think we did that really very well, and we decided we'd like to do rather more of that. So we're having conversations with John, who mostly do all of it, to say, can we actually become an official partner with you in the treatment centres? So that's very good news. I'll put some stats in about the number of people we saw last year, and I thought some of them we don't normally report, but that the hazardous area response team saw 25,000 participants. We think that's about 40% of the nation's total number of hazardous area responses. Our team saw alone. And our joint response cars in the mental health and community also saw 5,000 patients in the year as well. There's a photo in the report of Bernard Weatherall House, which is the London Borough of Croydon's HQ, which we're moving our 111 service in South London into. Harry and Rakesh are leading on that. If we're going from a pretty decrepit 1960s building, so it's got state-of-the-art office accommodation, state-of-the-art IT and telephony in it too for our teams. That's really good news. Should happen in the autumn, the move. There's a photo of our brand new ambulances. This is the first 9 of 132 new vehicles that Rakesh's team and John's team are putting out on the road between now and October. Bumped into our head of fleet walking over here today, who says 3 of these 9 are operational duty now already in and around this part of London. Right, so that's really good news. We started a new service with ARTS, Adult Critical Care Emergency Support Service. So any patient who needs transferring between different ITUs in and around London, providing a special service for those patients. That is going really well. We have a visit from Julian Hartley, who's the new Chief Executive of Health Provider. We were his first visit, and he wrote a really amazing blog about what he saw and how he thinks much ambulance services can do for the country. You already mentioned that Dean is coming into LAS. Having achieved that, we are now a London living wage accredited employer, which is something I think we should be very proud of. It's about 500 people. We have both insourced and given significant pay rises to ensure everyone who works for us is on a piece of London living wage. You mentioned when you asked about the conversations about team-based working. We've now got that in 4 of the groups, with 2 more to go in the month of June, and everybody by September. It's a massive thing, and I think we should probably bring that back as a proper item forward, because it is a huge cultural transformation for John and Aaron team for Union. We launched a new leadership program. So we realised that we hadn't been giving our first line leaders any good management education for a long period of time. So we secured 100 places from NVQ 6 with Middlesex University. We asked people who'd like to do it. 163 people said they'd like to do it. So Rakesh was able to find the remaining money. So we now have 7 of our managers going through an NVQ 6 program. Should be very good. And some of the education is bespoke to us. So Rakesh and team have designed the finance module so that it exactly fits to how LAS got money. I was honoured to join the NHS National Muslim Network to celebrate their Eid al-Fitr celebration for the NHS. Turns out that one of the co-chairs of the National Muslim Network works for us. So that was good to be invited. I facilitated the Fans Plus Awareness event for the whole of the ambulance sector for 2 hours, listening to some quite challenging stories about people who are trans and their experiences of working in the ambulance sector. A lot of learning for us that. John led our team for the National Day of Reflection, and then Richard Webb Stevens, who got the King's Ambulance Medal, represented us at a national memorial on for reflection too. And then there's some amazing staff and patient stories at the end of the report. So we've got Angie and Steve, who are brother and sister, who saved the life of a patient. Angie was shadowing her brother. She's a full hand lady with a paramedic. That was very impressive. Then we have a paramedic, an emergency medical technician, James, autism, and shares his stories about how to overcome that. And my favourite one is Zainab, little girl who saved her mom's life by being so very good on the telephone. And I think our call handler was taking message as well. And then representative Zainab was pink. But there's many more things to talk about too.
Thanks very much indeed. Also, I noticed in your report the fundraising efforts at the same time. Congratulations. Other questions?
Just 2 things for me. So, firstly, just on the team-based working, these are kind of big questions actually, and also and also on the oversubscribed, which is fantastic. 65. What is the plan around continuous follow-up, continuous learning? I presume there'll be, whilst there's positivity coming from team-based working, I'm sure there'll also be things that need to be improved and embedded in that. I'm sure as these managers and graduated from this program, and we support them as they embed this learning.
Well, I think I know the answer to both of those questions, but let's start with John from the team-based one, and Damien for that.
Yeah, so as part of Teams-based working, they every 9 weeks on average have a Teams day, which has not happened previously. So part of that agenda is how is the team functioning? What are we doing? Our data systems are all moving to being Teams-based. So if you're working in Hillingdon, Team A, you should be able to see your team data. That sort of the whole trance of work about how we show your information at a team level as well as an individual and a group level. And in terms of the managers, although you're in a team of managers as well, so you're in more than one team. Those teams have a development program that goes on throughout the year, which David might want to touch on. We've just done that for all of our clinical team managers, had 2 days on the same day. So we've done 2 days of all of our clinical team managers, which hasn't happened, I don't think, for quite a number of years, not in person anyway. So that's how we have the luxury of being out of the pandemic, that the opportunity to do this is there. So we are monitoring stuff now at Teams level. We've also commissioned Transformation Now, so a company who are working with us, who are doing a robust analysis of where we're up to against the data. But we commissioned a research project with the College of Paramedics previously. That's a train at the moment, so that will come back to the board in due course and take a while because they're doing individual interviews with people as well as doing data analysis.
Yeah, thanks, Sheila. In terms of feedback, so most of the feedback we're hoping to get via the appraisal system, which is about to go digital. There's also been co-design of the training calendar in that respect. How we measure it is the big question. So we'll look at our core KPIs of the population's KPI, the quality of information from the appraisals. So the future development for us is how we're going to measure the culture on a regular basis and not the annual staff survey. And that's key. And that's the pipeline of the culture program, is to get a actual culture reporting. So we're working in that regard. Finally, the career pathway is the big thing for our staff. So what's the leadership program? What's next for them? What's that? Whether we're going to develop organisation. And that is also going to be refreshing. I think we'll be taking a much more detailed forward look of our cultural program.
I guess for me, the thing is that continuous feedback and then continuous improvement. So we hear from the first cohort to go through this program. We listen to what worked well, what didn't work well, and build it into principle. I think it's that sort of.
So overall, that's what team-based working. We're very excited for pivot first. And then they start saying, but what about I want to fix this?
Yeah.
I want this. Can you let me now do it? And you say, well, that's exactly what we wanted the team. So for example, yesterday, overall, met with Rakesh's Make Ready team. So how are we actually going to get Make Ready to work better for them? They came out with a completely different service how they'd like it to be. And then in scheduling, you're doing a piece of work, or why are we doing all our staff cost group centrally? How do you devolve that locally so the team do it then? So I kind of think we're getting it's like getting a foundation in place where you're enabling people to actually do stuff themselves.
Yeah.
Because they're now doing structure to do it. So I think it will.
Ronald, did you have your hand up?
I did, Andy, but I took it down again because I think Sheila's asked the question I was going to pose. But actually, while I've got the podium, just to say, I actually pull out a bit of what you were saying, Andy. I think it's really good to see the accessibility and the openness of the senior team and the engagement that's going on. So I think all of these initiatives just play to how we're trying to improve the culture, which is, moving it from where it has been to something that is a lot more positive and engaging. So well done to the team.
Yeah, I absolutely endorse that. Just on that well led, I think as I say, I found people very positive. People who had been reluctant were looking at the benefits of that. But from a personal perspective, it struck me when I first came to the organisation to see leaders not with their teams did not make entire sense to me. And I think people now being with their teams is absolutely right. I think how you can lead the team if you're not with them. And exactly as you were saying, there were lots of discussions about what more can we be doing locally. It's actually exciting, a lot of energy, I think, amongst the supervisors in particular. And there'll be challenges around about local scheduling and building, but nevertheless, I think it's doing really good work. I'm just also thinking about, I didn't have a single concern raised about
the sickness programme. And, you know, in absolute contrast to my last series of visits. So I answered a lot of questions on this, but the figures going, looked at it later, the figures going exactly that way. And it seems to have been accepted really, really well. So again, congratulations on all the hard work that's gone into it. Any further questions at all, Daniel? If not, excellent report, Daniel. Some terrific stuff that's going. And your ability to get around the organisation and be visible and run the organisation is extremely commendable.
I think you're doing better at me at getting around it.
Yeah. But you were telling me, was it 19,000 steps? Was it that you were doing at the coronation? Yeah, very, very impressive, actually. Really well done. Right, let's move on to the next item, please, Daniel, which is category 1 data quality.
So this is a really important, serious item. So for 2 years, we were publishing incorrect data relating to our response times for the most seriously injured and sick people in London. And we are really, really sorry that that happened. The report we published today is now on our website, was commissioned by an independent team of experts. It sets out what happened, how it happened, the impact, and it makes recommendations of what we need to do to ensure that this can't happen again. So as soon as the historical error came to our attention, which we found when we were implementing our new computer-aided dispatch system, we as a board took immediate action to report to our regulators and to investigate what had happened. And in the report, there are a lot of recommendations in this independent review, and we accept all of them. And we've also published the action plan, which sets out how we are implementing those actions. As the chief exec, I'm confident that we now have safeguards and the people in place to ensure that people can trust the data that we publish and trust that it is accurate. Throughout the whole period of this, that the investigation covers, I've also called our crews and call handlers did absolutely everything they could to get to our patients as soon as possible when they were contacted and do so. The report sets out there is no known evidence that patients came to harm during this period as a result of the reporting error. And importantly, all the data we use to investigate complaints, incidents, and coronial cases that were identified during this time period all use the right data, because the data was taken directly from the computer-aided dispatch system and not data that we processed by the data warehouse, which is where the issue was. I think the context is important because for most of the time under consideration in this report, we were operating in uncharted territory. It was the COVID pandemic. It was an incredibly difficult time for the health service, and our teams were absolutely at the front line of that. So it is really hard to make comparisons between this data and data that precedes it or current data. And we want to be really open and transparent as an organisation, which is why today we have published the report in full, the action plan, and our response to it, so everybody can see everything that we go back to it.
Thank you. Questions for that, please? Andrew.
Can I ask about a bit more about the impact on the patients, maybe the better or to comment, because it's essentially the effect of this error was for it to be longer than we thought, getting to category 1, the most seriously ill patients. So can you say a bit more, Fenella, about why you're assured that harm didn't occur as a result of that extended time?
Yes, so the processes that we've had in place for many years that we enhanced during the COVID pandemic, which is when this incident happened, is that we have looked in detail at patients where there was a delay, either to call handling or to our ability to respond. We have triangulated that against complaints, incidents that have been raised to us internally or externally by healthcare professionals, carers, or anyone else. And when we've done that, we have done a review of that case. We have been in touch with the carers or the family, and we have learned from that and continue to improve. So where there was a delay due to our ability to respond, we have already looked at it.
Thanks very much. Obviously, one of the issues will be about how we as a board are assured that the action plan is taken. What routes it goes and how it comes to the board to ensure that all those things which are in the action are properly discharged. We have our new committee. Should we want to talk about that, please?
Yes, Chair. I've been asked to chair a new subcommittee to the board. It will be a digital data subcommittee. Among the terms of reference for that, one of the terms of reference is that this will be the oversight committee that oversees the implementation of the recommendations coming from the C1 and Category 1 data quality and digital review. So the members of non-execs and executives will be part of that subcommittee. I will report back monthly on progress, and I will also escalate if I am not comfortable, we as a committee are not comfortable that I'm receiving forward assurance around the implementation.
And that will report back through to the board.
Yes.
Of course. Rommel, as head of audit, any observations, please?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I guess as a non-exec first, just to say, I think to recognise, I guess, the fact that the exec took really prompt action, so brought the issue to the board as soon as the anomaly was discovered, reported ourselves to NHSC for that independent review that Daniel referred to, and we've just been talking about the action plan to assure ourselves on how we would prevent a repeat of this occurring. I guess the good thing about this is that there is no evidence of patient harm, which was the question Anne just brought out. And also, I think that this proved this was a technical mistake and not an intent to mislead, which is quite important. So, back to how are we thinking about our culture and strengthening governance? So the fact that the board has taken the decision to set up the new committee, the Digital and Data Assurance Committee, which has got quite a big job ahead, I think, with not just this issue, but other transformation that's taking place in the organization. And that this will remain an ongoing item, I think, for assurance for the board, as well as the audit committee and our internal audit programs.
Thank you, Rommel. Any other questions on this matter? Just want to endorse the points that Rommel has made about the fact that this technical matter was discovered by the team. A lot of hard work went into find what the problem was and was swiftly reported to HSC. Now we have this report in front of us, regrettable matter being dealt with by the team, I think, swiftly. And therefore it's open to us as a board now to accept the report, accept the recommendations of a plan of action about the assurance phase for colleagues to be agreed. Thank you very much indeed. So next item, reports from our deputy chief executives. What are we doing?
Thank you. I'm going to start. So, in taking us through the deputy chief executive, the chief medical officer and the chief quality officer reports, I would just refer people to, in the library, there is our integrated performance report and our quality report, which will give you additional information. As our portfolios cover it all, we've since split it up into 3 sections. So this first part is around our performance, and that's covered on pages 3 to 9 of the integrated performance report. From a 999 call answering and our emergency operations centre, the drop in calls coming into 999 during January had been recovered a little bit in February and March. We think that January was indicative of a further wave of people suffering with viral illness, staying at home a little bit more, industrial action in many parts of public sector, which certainly impacted on the number of calls and number of people who were in London, and also the after Christmas effect, which we always know that we see. Our call answering has seen a good call answer mean during March and April, but I would just draw the attention to the fact that we are still doing a lot of work on the tail, so the maximum call answering to make sure that we are addressing that. And that is being done through our Emergency Operations Centre Transformation Programme, which is being led by our director, who is looking at all aspects from call answering, the technology supported by Barry and his team, right the way through to beginning to introduce the teams-based working that we've seen so successfully being rolled out in frontline operations. We've got a team in place now delivering that transformation plan, and working very closely with colleagues to be able to both work on our efficiency, but also the quality of the calls that we're taking and the priority that we're giving to each patient. As part of that, everyone will be aware that we have been doing the Category 2 segmentation, which I'll touch on in my Chief Medical Officer report. Our 111 services have remained incredibly busy, and that's indicative of patients making the call to ring 111 for an urgent issue as opposed to an emergency problem. Our clinical assessment service has continued to provide a huge number of clinical assessments, and we are working through how we ensure that that call is returned to the patient in as timely fashion as possible. We continue to see spikes in demand at peak times. They are slightly different peak times to the 999 call, so actually it's around how we are able to use our colleagues in the most efficient way. But we have seen over 854,000 clinical consultations completed in the last year, and 2.3 million 111 calls coming into our services. So it is a very busy service providing high quality of care. The other area for which links both of those two together is our Tactical Operations Centre, which Andy's touched on in his visit there. And they are continuing to do an awful lot of work with the system to manage delays of hospital and hospital handover delays, which impacts our ability, as John will touch on, to respond to our patients. Unfortunately, over the last 6 weeks, we have seen an increase in hospital handover delays, which is indicative of a slightly increased volume of patients that we've been responding to, and a further viral illness that's been going around. And we are working very closely with NHS England support and the support of each of the integrated care boards to address this and to embed some substantive changes before we get into the autumn period. So it's embedded during the summer. But I think the graphs on page 2 and page 3, sorry, the statistics show that actually we have got an increasing number of hospitals struggling to take our handover at 30 minutes against the national target of 15.
Thank you. So the remaining report I'll pick up. Section 2 is the ambulance physical responses, is where we, after the call's been taken, as Fernando's outlined, if they need a physical response, we send. So for category 1, our most critical life-threatening calls, we achieved 8 minutes and 6 seconds on average in March, and 7 minutes and 8 seconds on average in April, which is makes us second in the country and significantly below the national mean of 8 minutes and 7 seconds. Our category 2, so our second category of patients, so not immediately life-threatening, but do need an immediate response. So national standard set there at 18 minutes. It was 39 minutes and 12 seconds for March and 31 minutes and 20 seconds for April. Slightly better in April. You'll see the handover graphs. We had less handover delays and actually less demand. So there were bank holidays, holidays, school holidays in April, which generally drops our demand a little bit. So we responded better in April than we did in March. Daniel's already picked up on clinical team managers, so I won't go over that again, and team-based working and the introduction of that across that. So that's the ambulance op section. The last bit for me to cover then is resilience and specialist assets. 2 significant incidents. One on the 30th of March was a fire in a care home in Bexley Heath. 6 patients treated, 4 conveyed to hospital. But I think importantly for this one, we looked after 57 people who were without a home for a period of time because it was obviously on fire. So we supported their assessment of their needs, and obviously then social services managed to move those residents as appropriately. And then on the 30th of April, another significant incident with carbon monoxide at a hotel in Kensington, where there were 200 people affected, 14 were conveyed to hospital. Again, lots of individual staff to manage. Daniel's already outlined the marathon, so looked after 300,000 spectators. We treated 309 people in our treatment centres, so our first time for us having done that at 73 within the footprint, which is the London Marathon, where we sent an ambulance to. Coronation's been mentioned, as has Manchester Arena. We mentioned that at last board meeting, has been picked up by the audit committee. The last thing I'll say, Fenella referred to our integrated performance report. It runs until the end of March. We are now in a new financial year. We are meeting very helpfully with are the people who are doing our well-led review on Tuesday, Samantha, Riley, Shruti and Nicholas CROT is coming to support the development of that. It's something we want to do anyway, but actually as we go into a new year, opportunity for us to do that. And you'll see in this report, we put up statistical process control chart for handover delay. So it maybe gives a bit of a nod to where we'll be heading for our report for next month.
Thank you. Anything further from yourself?
Sounds like a couple of questions, and thank you. You sort of answered that when you mentioned the need for performing report, that was helpful. Do you get a timeline as to when we're going to get a refreshed report?
Yes, so it'll be for the next lot of data. So the next public board meeting. Yeah, so we've already done a demo one. It came to our executive committee, and fortunately the people who do well over review that had some comments on it. So hence we've taken that opportunity to invite them in. They're coming on Tuesday to do a session with us. That will refine that further. We're coming back to our executive committee, and it'll be the data for April and May. So it'll be the July public board meeting, but certainly in June we can start sharing what that will look like for the April and May data.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And then I saw a mention of shrinkage and the fact that we're outside the national average. So what is, maybe you might want to explain the shrinkage is, because I don't know the term. And then what are we doing about getting back to the national average?
So I asked what shrinkage was, interestingly, because we've always looked in, so I'll answer that, but then for anybody else to explain. So in ambulance ops, we call that abstraction. So essentially it's, you start with this many people and then you remove them. Now 111 and then apparently call centres generally outside of 999 call it shrinkage. And hence in the 111 bit of the report it's called shrinkage because that's the term they use.
And how are we getting back to that?
So we have got very good support from people and culture and the embedding of the teams-based working, which we've seen where it's being rolled out in frontline operations, that that's significantly improved the well-being generally of our people to be able to do it. It's also around looking at rosters and making sure that the rosters fit the patient demand, but also the availability of our coordinators and health departments.
So there's a particular timeline for that, or is it?
So we're monitoring it on a monthly basis, and it will be in the integrated performance report, and we monitor it.
The trend line?
Yes, and we monitor it through our feedback and focus reviews that we do bi-monthly with each of the areas.
Well, thank you. Ron, please.
Thank you, Chair. I guess just a question of John and Fenella. I think you mentioned the Cat 1 times, but I was also looking at the number of incidents, and I saw a briefing recently which talked about the number of incidents dropping month on month. I don't know if that's true. And secondly, if you compare this before the pandemic, the numbers have actually gone up by something of the order of 32% now. I think these are national numbers, but I just wondered what's happening in London and what's kind of driving the dynamics here.
So shall I start with that? So category 1 and category 2 have both gone up over the last 3 to 4 years. We are at the moment, there's a big piece of work looking at that at a national level through all of the ambulance groups to look at it. It seems to be being driven by respiratory and long-term conditions, which are presenting in a more serious condition when they're calling for an ambulance. Category 1 calls, there is some work going on to ensure that category 1 is immediately life-threatening. So as you're aware, the triage tools that are used are, the initial questions are quite crude from the point of view of getting the information for somebody who is not breathing and not conscious so that we can get help to them as quickly as possible. And one of the pieces of work is to ensure that we're not sending resources where actually a further question can help us to be able to get the right response to those questions as we're doing in category 2, and that's being nationally led. The category 2 pilot that we have been part of, which we can touch on, is demonstrating that being able to take that time and to interrogate how we can help the patient best is certainly being able to provide individualised care for patients. that we are seeing it with regards to where we are level wise. We are still below where we were pre-pandemic. But what we have to, and Barry and the team are helping with this, is to compare contacts with incidents. So the number of 999 calls coming in versus the number of incidents. So the number of incidents, i.e. the response we give to the patient either face to face or on the telephone, has not changed as much as the number of contacts, which is also indicative of the work that we're doing in the Emergency Operations Centre, which includes a new process for the Metropolitan Police calls coming in. And also, as our call answering improves, we get patients ringing back to ask where their help is less frequently, which each counts as a contact. So we're very focused on watching the incident number, which is the number of people and patients who need our help.
Thanks for that. Walter,
Thank you, Chair. Ambulance handover times, my favourite subject. A couple of things, and one is the shape of the relative shape where the challenges still looks similar to that which it was. So a couple of things are, one, given the importance to us of success of the escalation strategy in place, what's our confidence level around that? But that will improve this year. And then following on, do we have any opportunity for what I would call focused escalation in those geographic patches which remain challenged?
Okay, so shall I start? So we've worked over the last 9 months with 6 of our hospitals, with the support of the ICSs, so the Integrated Care System, and the NHS England, to really understand what we can do. I think from our side, the really important part we play in this is making sure that patients who are taken to the emergency department need to go to the emergency department, and that actually we are utilising all of the alternative responses and alternative healthcare pathways, including same-day emergency care, to its absolute maximum. We cohorting patients, which is where one crew will look after several patients at the same time, releases ambulance crews back out into the system to respond to the next 999 patient, because this is not the right thing for patients. And so we have got a meeting next week to talk around how we support but implement a much faster response when we see queues beginning to build up.
Yes, that's the same question, so I think Bob's already on it.
Thanks. So I think Manella's been very polite in the answers you have. And we actually need to get agreement for a much stronger position on us about handover space. So we have a 45-minute handover policy that is agreed across London. We are really struggling to implement it. In part, we're struggling to implement it because the current policy says do it by consensus with both the system and the hospitals. And we'd like to move to a place that some of the other regions have agreed that ambulance trusts can move to, which is the ambulance trust can decide to implement the policy itself. And now we have a new regional directorate posted in London. I'm hoping we can use the region to provide more influence and support to us to actually be able to implement the policy. Because if we don't, we're not going to deliver the improvements in category 2 that we have been the additional funding to make happen, because that is explicit in that hospital handover delays massively decrease, and currently they're not.
And anyway, sorry, just picking up on that, in the regions where they have implemented the more sort of, ambulance-led policy, have they seen a decrease in hospital handovers?
A huge decrease, and also the feedback from the hospitals is this is not unhelpful. But it does, the point that Vanessa said, we've got to co-create that we only bring in patients who need to go to hospital. That is very important for both.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm just wondering whether how do we interface with the ICS? Does it form part of their agendas at their various meetings? Is there more we need to do, I need to do?
So hospital handovers should be on every integrated care board agenda. and discussed, and we share through Jackie and the team any concerns we've got about patient safety. What's more difficult to share, and where from a clinical perspective we want an end-to-end review of it, is if a patient is held on the back of an ambulance or on a trolley, or if a patient is held in the community waiting for an ambulance, actually what's their long-term deterioration in their ability to return to their pre-calling 999 status. And that's a really important piece of work, because if that delay is resulting in more patients being admitted, more patients staying in hospital for longer, more patients taking longer to be able to return to independence, then there is a system improvement that can be implemented as quickly as possible.
John?
Yeah, can I make 2 points? So reiterate Fenella's obviously the impact on patients. We talk often about the morale of our staff, but what is emerging now is the impact on our students. And you'll know from our clinical education plan the significant number we're bringing through, because they're seeing less patients per shift because they're waiting in handover queues. That means they're listening to less chest, diagnosing less ECGs. That has a knock-on effect to their clinical competence when we get to the end. So really important that not only for patients and their relatives and for the population we're serving is having an impact now on our students to be able to do that. Daniel just mentioned the extra funding the board is obviously aware of that we received from NHS England at month 1. We should have been at 45 minutes for category 2. We were at 31 minutes. We should have been at 50 seconds for call out. We're at 15. But when it comes to, so we're ahead of trajectory. When it comes to handover delays, and what was agreed as part of that funding was that it would be 125,000 lost hours. We're actually 321,000 lost hours. And I think as the year goes on, this is going to become harder, because the trajectory, as the board knows, gets harder to achieve. So we're quite well 3 times out on the number of handover delays. So we do need system support to achieve our trajectory with the additional funding.
Can I just ask on that? So in terms of the systems, how actively do they manage bed occupancy? So, because that's what's driving this, I assume. And therefore, you know, if at 8 o'clock in the morning you come in and you've got a bed occupancy of, I don't know, 150%, and you've got a load of people waiting to be admitted, you can pretty much predict what the ambulance over delays will be at that site first thing in the morning. And yet they, as a system, keep sending patients there. And is there not something we could do working with the systems to be more active?
So we are good at that.
Yeah.
So for most of the ICSs, there is a daily meeting.
Yeah.
And they do talk about at the beginning of the day what they think the bed occupancy and the flow is. And in real time, we then adjust where we take patients. But there's a limit to what you can do in that when the system is saying we've got this problem everywhere. The other big determinant about flow in the hospital is the leadership of the A&E department and how important that is relatively in hospitals. Horizon of what is difficult. There's quite a correlation between handovers and that as well.
Thank you. I mean, this is something I think we really have got to return to every time, see where we are on this. Anything that we can do, I can do, but it needs to be apprised of the arguments before I go into these meetings to make sure that we are raising it within the ICSs at the appropriate level. Because clearly this is entirely unsatisfactory. You have every sympathy for our acute clinics who are under enormous pressure in many, many different directions. But nevertheless, seeing our crews waiting sometimes for hours is just unacceptable. As you rightly say, unacceptable for patients who sit there in the back of the ambulances while they're waiting. I commend what's been done by our staff in making sure cohorting happens. Is not an ideal solution, but at least it's getting crews back out on the road to go and look after more patients. But it is unacceptable. We have to wait so long. Particularly, I think around the category 3s, which is something we don't often talk about. You know, people who are lying in pain, who need help, we should be let on. So thank you very much for what we've been doing on this front. Need to hear more in each course. Mark, the Quality Assurance Committee, please.
Thank you very much, Andy. Very little to say. You've all seen the report. A few things I want to highlight. First, that there's a range of overdue incidents or incidents where investigations are overdue, and just highlighting the fact that we're reviewing that. There is an improvement plan in place to try to reduce that. We do want these reports to be timely. Secondly, there's the optimising our response to category 2 patients. London Ambulance was a lead in piloting that, an early adopter for that, and that's now being rolled out following the shaping of the work we've done locally. As Fenella mentioned briefly earlier, we are trialling a separation in QAC of a pre-meet where we go through the patient safety incidents ahead of time with the clinicians to discuss those in more detail and feeding back. So hopefully we're able to give more time to understanding the issues and feedback once we've understood the learning. The quality account was approved, and just to note the Fix the Basics programme, which should help reduce the number of complaints you get when you go around, Andy, as people get happier with the stuff they are being sent out with. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Questions for Mark, please? If not, thanks very much. Next item, please, treatment culture, Damien.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take it as read.
Oh, I'm very sorry. Apologies, I jumped ahead. Please.
So I do mind, I've put out a few highlights from the, in my role as Chief Paramedic Quality Officer. First up is the clinical education. So 218 learners have been through in this reporting period, but I think pleased to say we've had 31 new tutors or educators recruited in the year, which is critical for our ability to deliver. And that includes some turnover, which I think has been important as we did more of that. Not in the report, but we put 4,400 learners through different courses last year, and that's not including our core skill refresher. We've probably taken nearer 10,000. So well done to the education team, and you'll note that they had an external quality assurance visits. On top of Ofsted we've had previously, we have to have external quality assurance visits as part of our programme, and they received green across the board for that visit. Safeguarding continues to be above target at 91%. The ongoing and Mark and the quality constituent level 2, which is in the EOC. All of our staff are trained when they come in, so it's not they don't have the training, it's about their update training is improving, and there's an improvement plan in place, but that's at 62.5%. I think worth noting for the board's attention that all of the work on sexual harassment, we know that's an issue across ambulance services. I put in the board report the figures for the last 3 years at 7, 18 and then 41 concerns. So in some ways it feels like we should be concerned, but actually I believe that this is because we've put such an evidence of saying it's safe to report within the London Ambulance Service. A deep dive has been done into that, and a report will be coming from myself and Damien shortly into the Quality Assurance Committee in relation to all of those cases that we've had for the 41 in the last year. So a bit more depth. That's just in its final draft. Patient safety, as Mark touched on, we've got a new subcommittee. I won't give you the figures in there, but you can see how they've how the numbers for the quarter. What I will say is we've had a 42% reduction in those that we would count as delayed. So it's the dispatch and call category in terms of data it's reporting, but they're effectively been delays, and I think that shows that our improvement in response times for quarter 4. Freedom to speak up concerns 47 within the quarter. We continue to work on the National Guardian Office's report and recommendations. Health and safety, we're obviously at year end, so 561 assaults this year, which is not good for our staff. We have had 27 successful prosecutions. And lastly, I've added in my report just that this time the emergency bed service, slightly odd term, but they do all of our safeguarding referrals. What the board will know, and it will be in our safeguarding annual report, which will be coming to the Board Assurance Committee next month, is child referrals are this year, which relates to the pandemic and coming out of that. And not just us, it's common across health and social care sectors about that. Frequent callers 585 within the month. So I'll pause there.
Okay. Questions for John, please?
Just, I'm sorry, and I think it's in your report, it's one of the TSU action plan. I think we said in the report of the PCC and the deadline, so is that delayed?
It didn't come to the last.
This one, yes, so that's the one on the back of the free, yeah, the national one, yeah, so it's in trade, yeah, so we're coming to
So we have it circulated from great correspondence.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful.
So two things on your freedom to speak up. So the report said there is a minimum level of staffing you should have in your freedom to speak up in an evidence trust. And we took the cost pressure business case through our process to agree that we would do that for LAS. So Parliament is now in the process of recruiting additional people. And then the second thing is the National Freedom to Speak Up ambulance report said there should be an independent review into the culture of the ambulance services. And we got some email round yesterday saying NHS England have appointed Siobhan Nenia, who is the outgoing interim chief exec of South East Coast Ambulance, who's gone back to her substantive job as a Sussex Community chief executive. And I think she's acknowledged as quite a big expert on culture. Now she's seen an ambulance service in action for 9 months. She is going to do that piece of work.
Okay, so I will take the report to read. I just would like to highlight a few things. We've talked about much of the patient safety and the handover delays, so I will not go back through that. As we know, we've done the category 2 segmentation pilot with West Midlands as the early adopters of that, and that's been very successful. During the month of March, we were able to manage patients in a better way and individualised way, and to provide an additional 2,500 hours of ambulance time for our sickest patients to respond to them more quickly. As part of our learning from industrial action, where we had senior decision makers, we have taken that forward to have GPs and emergency medicine consultants supporting the ability to be able to refer patients into alternatives before dispatch of an ambulance, and that has now got agreement from all of the 5 integrated care board chief medical officers to take that forward as part of our improvement for our category 2 response. It also ensures that patients we're getting them earlier in their journey into those alternative pathways. For our paramedics, career progression is really important, and I have just highlighted some of the work being done by our advanced paramedic practitioners, both in critical care and urgent care, but we are recruiting at the moment into both, and have just recruited the next 15 urgent care clinicians. Our urgent care response cars, joint response cars, are now out into the sectors and are seeing a conversion rate of between 22% and 40%, which is significantly lower than a frontline ambulance, and that's continuing to make good progress. I'd just like to highlight 2 other areas where we have regulatory responsibility, infection prevention control. Despite us still being in a COVID recovery period, having monkeypox and streptococcus A, the infection prevention control team were able to achieve all of their work plan deliverables last year, which I think we would all congratulate them on. And our medicines management team held the second 2-day seminar on medicines management. This is not done in any other ambulance service at all. There was an opportunity for managers, including many of the executives, to go and hear about the regulatory requirements from the police around how they work closely with us, and then the next day for clinicians to come and to be able to work alongside and to do scenario work to understand it. Our patient outcomes are there and also in the integrated performance report and quality report. We, as you know, on a monthly basis review our data. It is retrospectively then looked at against the data that comes out about 6 months in arrears for the national data, because we don't know the final outcome for patients when we look at that. We have got a big London lifesaver to increase the number of patients who get early resuscitation, basic life support, so chest compressions in defibrillation, and this month we signed up to an online learning app with Resuscitation Council UK and Good Sam and our London Lifesavers. And for anyone who is in need of a refresher for their basic life support, it is really very, very good online training for answering questions and doing an interactive basic life support, but you can see on page 6 of my report, actually getting the public access defibrillator to the patient significantly improves their outcomes. So a really big and important piece of work. And then as we come towards concluding my report, but also the year, the research department is very, very busy at the moment, as you can see, with over 1,000 LAS paramedics involved in trial recruitment, and our clinical audit team have produced the most recent audit, which is on the use of Entonox, which is the gas and airport pain relief, and that's been shared across the organisation.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, please.
Yes. Thank you.
So could you just say a little bit, clearly we don't have a lot of time, just a little bit about how I mean, we clearly got a load of research work out. You say something about how successful we are at converting good research into active practice, either from just us or the ambulance service wider.
So the research that we're involved in is multi-centred and informs the JRCALC, so the guidelines for ambulance clinicians. So one of the drugs, and we've been involved in the CRASH trials 1, 2, 3, and now 4, which is for tranexamic acid, about how to get to somebody who's bleeding, how we can try and stop that bleeding quickly. We've been involved in influencing the revision of those. So our research feeds straight into the pre-hospital guidelines. There's another big one, the HOT zone, which is built on learning from major incidents. So London Bridge, Manchester Arena, to see how we don't delay getting help to patients who are in a hostile environment.
Would I be right in understanding that then our research goes into inform rather than we have a direct research straight into service where we feel comfortable that it's giving us the right answer? Is that the right process?
So research informs, clinical audit, we make the immediate changes.
I understand. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Just a quick one. In the segmentation pilot, is it planned that will report the response times by segment?
Yes.
Because we haven't got that in this report. Yeah, but we know
because we were still in the early pilot stages. The data was during pilot stage sent into NHS England. Now we've got all ambulance services, it will start to be able to grant into this report and to the introductory.
Any further questions? If not, thanks very much. Yes, let's go to Damien, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will take it as read and just put out some key points to note. So in our May People and Culture Committee, we reported our recruitment activity to get us to the 250 frontline improvement last year. And just to give some assurance that our pipeline is particularly strong again, with 524 UK staff in the pipeline and 285 international paramedics. And just a reference to one specific recruitment episode. In the last board, we had the staff story of the former employee regarding sexual safety. This employee has reapplied to the organisation, citing that her faith in the organisation is being restored. I won't go too much into the quotations, but we wish her well in her rejoining us as an organisation. In respect to that recruitment activity, however, we're aware that our pipelines are not representative of London. And in our recent EDI committee, we shared a project we're about to start on EDI specialist in recruitment consultancy, and there'll be further updates to follow, which we'll be looking at our recruitment processes, but also our brand, in particular to Londoners. In terms of wellbeing, various initiatives is the main core of our activity, and you can see them listed in the report itself. The key thing to note, of course, is absence management. So April reflected our lowest absence to 2020, and for the first time below our KPI at 5.7%. So a huge thanks to all our managers in working with our new enablers such as occupational health and the frontline first aid absence reporting, but there is a huge amount of work ongoing with the people who are out meeting. So huge thanks to them. And also the feedback is going to amend one of the portals. So we'll come back on feedback there. Daniel's mentioned the main aspect of the cultural transformation program, which is our leaders, so I won't go into further detail really. And then the final thing we did in May's People and Culture Committee was a deep dive into our staff survey. We did report this in the previous May, but this was a deep dive into the local reporting and associated local action plans with areas that we did.
Thank you. Any questions for Dave? Yes.
Maybe now I'm thinking of the plans report. In reference to the challenges PLC recruitment and all the actions you're taking. Can you just say a little bit more about that or intervention that's required? How big is the problem as it was?
Yeah.
And just second thing was the fact that we're still challenged with C1 driving license standard. I just wondered how do we, is there more we need to do to get that resolved? As it's been a challenge for quite some time.
Yes. So if I do the second question firstly, so the C1 remains a problem. But it's a kind of mask problem because all it is a period of time of delay. So if you like, the best way I can describe it, we lost a quarter of delays. But because our pipeline is so strong, we're just always 3 months behind the curve. So it's a managed problem, but it remains a problem. And we are waiting the outcome of the government consultation. But I think we're in a position now we have it managed by nature of the fact of having a very healthy pipeline. With respect to EOC, what we were flagging in the committee was a forward look. So at the moment, our pipelines, our immediate action are strong, but our concern is that our ability to attract is considering a problem down the line. That's not, that problem is multiplied by the fact that retention could be better. So there will be a deep dive presented to the People and Culture Committee with respect to EOC and the associated transformation activity to look at the job role, how we recruit, how we keep staff for career pathways. So it's a holistic view to improve that staff engagement experience. As of right now, I think we are managing it, but we are early flagging we shall see a problem.
So I'll take the report as read in the interest of time. So the issues that we deep dived into with that EOC recruitment, you covered that, Sheila. I mean, I just want to emphasise the absolutely tremendous work that's been done in sickness absence. We spent quite a lot of time looking at that. I have to say this probably as chair of the committee, I didn't think it was going to be possible in the London Ambulance. I've been proven wrong. So I just think that's tremendous. And actually, as you evidence chair, the people are now finding it supportive. So I think that's really, really good. We had a really important conversation about retention, because when you look at the data, actually, in a lot of areas, we can attract people, we can't retain people. And so, as Damien said, we're going to have a deep dive into that, particularly to start to understand what are the different career pathways that we can have within the service. So in particular, can we be realistic about how long we expect people actually to stay in EOC? And can we see a career pathway where they would be managed further on and not necessarily have to leave the service? So much greater emphasis, we think, on retention. And the only other thing, two things to draw out was the staff survey. So people got there what the key areas of improvement were. And in particular, the availability of equipment, things people were saying had improved. But in line with the conversation we had about handover delays, the area that really had deteriorated was people feeling that they were providing good care to patients. That's obviously something that we would all be concerned about. The last thing just to flag to the board was the executive brought a request to revise the scoring for the burnout risk. We had quite a discussion about that. The risk, as members will know, is currently drafted. The evidence suggests that it's reducing, and of course the evidence within the 2022 staff survey report, which was the risk on our back, was in response to that, hasn't reduced in this survey. However, the executive were clear that they were seeing evidence that in terms of operational pressures and the reduce the rate level, that was having an impact on themes of burnout, and therefore we've asked Damien to go away and think about, have we got the right risk on the back.
Thanks. Any questions on the report? If not, ADI? Please.
Yeah. So this was the first meeting of the committee, and you've got its report. So we were just finding our way. So we talked about the terms of reference, and in particular, what's the scope of this committee? And broadly, the debate was, should it be focusing primarily internally on our EDI agenda, recognising that there's an interface with our staff responding to London's diverse workforce, or is it broader than that? We're looking at how we respond in a clinical setting to the diverse needs of patients. And I think where we got to on that was a sense that actually it should be an internal focusing committee, but there needs to be strong relationship with the quality committee. And there was a discussion about whether it'd be helpful to have a patient representative on the committee to feed in terms of their views. We then had an overview of the current work programme, and I won't go into the detail in the interest of time, but on it there was very strong steer from the non-executives present that actually it would be important not to dissipate our efforts and to focus on a few high impact areas. So for example, our turnover rate of EDI, staff is much higher than overall. And so in terms of improving the diversity of our workforce, if we were able to retain more, then actually that would have a bigger impact more quickly for us than some of the longer term things we need to do, which is to change the image of the ambulance service for certain communities. So there was a strong steer there. We took the gender pay gap report, as you'd have seen, and very critically published. And we talked about the training that Dan talked about, which is the new neural inclusion pathway. With a very extensive training programme, both the staff and the managers being rolled out from now across the service.
Well, thank you for taking on. It's really, really important at any stage of our development, but certainly we look forward to when we come to that. So thank you. Any questions at all? If not, thank you very much. We'll take a break now, please, at 12:18, and we'll return at 12:45. Please, lunch is downstairs. Thank you. The other one has been word on not. Yes. We start, we recording, Meg?
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to next part, things, which is finance and finance director's report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, the report is the, key parts of the report are, subject to audit, external audit, which we're now in the middle of. The trust ended last year with a small surplus of £100,000. So we delivered essentially a financial ID target and our capital investment last year was just under £34 million. Dan has already referred to the fleet rollout, so the several crew ambulances have started to come in and we're commissioning them. As Danny said, the first three are now an over group, the Mustangs are now all rolled out, as well as the infrastructure, EV infrastructure is now in place. There are a couple of more stations to do, but essentially they're in place. And the big space project is relocating our 111 operating center to Burton Burden, so that's in full swing as well. And Danish necessary, you can see the building it's an amazing building for the local borough stuff.
Thank you. Is there any opportunity around education centre?
There may be very small facilities, but we have a program that there isn't that much space there. There may be some classrooms that are not fully fitted for education centre.
Okay, I know we've got two outstanding centres. There's travel matters for some parts of it.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, well done on being on finances. It's such a complicated, challenging year. Are there any questions?
I was only going to say on the education centre.
Right, yeah.
So when we opened the two, one in east and one in west, there was a lot of comment from the staff saying, what about north and south? Which is what you all picked up, which you particularly went to Broadway. So when I came, I did say we would try and get a third education centre in the south, thinking we would be able to co-locate it with the 111 base in Croydon. And the amount of space that the 111 service needs has grown hugely, which meant that there really isn't space for a big education centre in Croydon. But also, you can't do driving in Croydon because there's nowhere to park all the private vehicles. And we were given the opportunity at both Brenside and Dockside to expand our footprint on two existing education centres into something much bigger. And we decided that was much better value for us to do that than opening the centre. And actually, the feedback from the people who go to the two education centres is unbelievably positive. It's a great experience. So I think we're of the view that it says you go to education not every day. They're both accessible by public transport. And we think we've got the right one.
Yeah. Certainly, Granny folks said no problem at all, which very expected. There was some pushback about this stuff. Anything else on the cash? Paul, if not, Paul, we'll go over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Paul, I hope it's self-explanatory. This was what we call BIC Light. So it has a less intense agenda than the full FIP meetings. We did assure ourselves that we're in a position that Rakesh spoke about, but we were pretty confident about that from our previous to year-end forecasting conversations. We did approve the ambulance radio program business case, but we did put some sort of caveated conditions on it that we wanted to see coming back as implementation happened, and the committee will continue to pick that up in due course. I would just say for information, because of timing, our first full BIC of 23-24 is tomorrow morning. The key agenda item will be a relative deep dive into the state of the cost improvement programme this year. It's clear that the executive and the teams are ahead for 23-24 to that which they were for 22-23, but there's still a fair bit of work to do. And in the context of the earlier conversations about recruitment processes, retention processes, some of our CIPs this year are dependent on success in those areas. So we'll be exploring that tomorrow. And I intend to continue with the Fix Right programme in 23-24, focusing purely on financial performance and cost improvement performance in between the formal Fix sessions. And I'll use that as a minor assurance piece for the board, and recognising completely that not all heads will be able to make that cycle, but effectively I will be making all of that cycle. So worst comes to worst, it'll be me having a chat with retention about how well it's all going.
I can assure the board, you may not be, you won't be friendly.
But I'll take it.
Yeah, well done, Bob. Thank you. Any questions? Finance? If not, thanks very much indeed. Audit committee, please, Ronald.
Thanks, Sandy. I guess just to contrast with Bob's thick light, this was an audit committee heavy. I think big focus obviously on the year end, and as part of that we received the points I would draw out is just the head of internal audit opinion, draft opinion, which was moderate assurance, which included, going back to the earlier item on data quality and data integrity, an internal audit that the audit committee commissioned. We're still to go through the follow-up to that because we raised a number of points of challenge and clarification, and also pointed to a draft annual governance statement, which we took, where we thought there should be increased transparency, going to the earlier point that Daniel made about openness and transparency, and including that in the C1, on the C1 reporting issue. Other points, just to note, the green NHS counter fraud submission. So basically reflecting a good, healthy approach to fraud. And that's from Daniel on down through the team. And we're still to take the external audit, which is still ongoing, I think, and subject to further testing. And I have a check-in with the external auditor next week, and obviously I'll be speaking to Rakesh in due course as well. But those are the points I would draw out, Chair.
Thanks very much, Ronald. Any questions for Ronald on audit? If not, thanks ever so much. It looks like a very heavy agenda there. We'll move on then to charitable funds.
Again, Chair, I hope explanatory. Jessica, who leads on it under Roger's executive sponsorships, doing a very good job of getting the basics in order, and we look forward actually to quite an interesting 23-24 in expanding activity and increasing the impact that the charity has and the funds it has available to support LAS staff.
Questions for Bob on charity? If not, thanks very much indeed. We'll go on now to the corporate director.
Yeah, I'll pick out a couple of issues. So if you look at the complaints graph on page 1, you'll see over the course of the year, there's been a very significant reduction in overdue complaints. There was a bit of an uptick in the final month of the year, but that's now the latest, they're not on here, the very latest figures. We've got 103 complaints in 1867 that are out of date, that have come back down again. Those complaints which are significantly delayed, it is invariably because they are complex investigations, usually involving our quality assurance processes. DSPT, we are on course for achieving the DSPT again this year.
Just explain what that is.
Data Security Protection Toolkit. It's a series of information governance tests that we have to pass in order to assure the outside world that we handle information in a safe and secure way. The one area we need to pay attention to is information governance training.
We have to train 754 people in information governance by the end of June. That is perfectly doable. We discussed it yesterday at Exco. And we've agreed to put on, as well as the online training, we're going to put on some face-to-face training, particularly for those members of staff who've joined us recently from Make Ready or cleaning. You may not be quite so. The tech might not be so accessible.
Do we adjust that training at all, or is it the same basic training we have to do?
I mean, there's a basic curriculum, but I think what we deliver face-to-face will be a bit different from what we deliver online.
I mean, it can be a little clunky. I just wonder for those sorts of stuff at the time, I've got to.
Yes, I mean, I guess it's doing it face-to-face is a bit particularly for those kind of staff, not being patronising, but it is a chance to make it a bit less clunky, isn't it? So I suspect we'll be drawing attention to real life incidents. Where they may come across some information in what they.
Some of these roles was bespoke to them.
Exactly, yeah. I suspect there are some things that we need to, I know there are some things that we will need to cover in order for the training to be judged appropriate, but we will make it as appropriate for them as we can. We've been fortunate actually because we've recently recruited someone who did face-to-face training at North Trust. So we're hoping they've got some material they can use from their old trust on areas. The other thing I was just going to mention is we are making progress with freedom of information. You'll see that our compliance with the response standard has gone up. The thing we haven't particularly made a note of here, but I'll mention it particularly at the next meeting, is we've cut off the tail. So we did have some requests that were taking a long time to sort out. Those have been largely dealt with. We've now got a streamlined way of signing off freedom of information, which is essentially via the NSA, particularly.
Good, well done for getting into the tail of those matters. Any questions?
Just to ask a question. Clarifications on the services, the employment liability 10 there, how does that relate to the 20+ employment tribunals that are in there?
Well, anything to do with employment in terms of our relationship as employers is dealt with by HR.
That's not that liability.
I think it might mean employers' liability, i.e. somebody's tripped over.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, so that's
Yeah, I think it's personal injury claims rather than.
right, okay.
There was some discussion on stage about any sort of professional standards type approach to complaint investigation. Is that something that's being considered?
Yeah, we have an internal process ongoing on the recommendations of the consultations to introduce that service. So that launch on Wednesday, get feedback. We should be in position by the next report to share it.
That'd be really interesting. Again, some of the feedback I've been getting is the amount of time it takes for people out around to deal with these matters, their suitability to their training. And sometimes having to work with the subject of that complaint, again, which get back like occasionally did begin. I know there's always about centralised and decentralised. There's arguments both ways, but I thought it's an interesting assistant point.
They're naturally taken through people and culture committee first.
Any further questions for Mark? That, if not, well done, thanks very much. Quality report, Jackie.
So some key things to pull out from the report, which contains the March 2023 data, are across the trust, the number of our no harm incidents have reduced back to the normal range. That's over the last 3 months. The top 3 no harm categories remain static, but to know that our dispatching pool number of incidents has reduced with 57 compared to 179 in December. And that's largely the delays. Instance that we're seeing come down, which is these patients. In the ones, the no harm instances has gone up a bit recently. However, this is in due to increased reporting, particularly around demographic errors, around telephone number addresses. That's due to work that we've been doing in that part of the organisation to report and say that we can put appropriate actions in place. So that's not an unexpected increase. Our IPC measures are looking at quite strong at the moment. We continue to exceed the trust performance standards in a number of areas. Moving on to overdue incidents, you'll be aware that we've been focusing on overdue incidents for some time. So whilst it's still a very high number, at the time of reporting at 736 overdue incidents, so we continue to take work to bring that figure down to a much lower level. We plateaued a little bit. I think so we need to sort of think a bit differently about how we make sure that we keep that work going and we continue in the right direction.
Just on that, why would they be?
For a long period of time.
Yeah.
So some of the things that we found is we've got some slightly more complicated instances that need a bit of information from one part of the organisation and another part of the organisation to close. We've got some variation across the organisation in the extent to which they have specific name support from the policy directorate. So in operations and sector-based operations, for example, we've got a quality manager in each sector and a slightly smaller number of quality support officers. So we tend to see improvement in the areas that have got that level of support, but that's not matched across the whole organisation, unfortunately. So we're looking at how we can support those other parts of the organisation more effectively. And we've also, by virtue of doing a number of kind of like workshops, identified that there are some parts of the organisation that's working comfortably using data and using a bit of support, which we've been able to put in place as well. The main reason that we've had, however, a large number of overdue incidents is reflected with the just the sheer pressure on some of the staff that are managing these incidents and managing both kind of operations delivery and to ensure that we produce, as many hours as possible to keep patients safe with managing the backlog and the incidents.
Yeah, I just wondering, are some just open because they haven't been closed? In the sense as well as those who've got investigation.
Yeah, certainly at the beginning of the process, we were finding that, there's a bit of low hanging fruit, a bit of housekeeping that needed to be done. Now we're into the instance which I think a little bit more managing.
Right.
From a Statman point of view, broadly, we've exceeded for last year the 85% target. The area to pull out is our level 2 safeguarding training, which at the end of the year was sitting at 71.45%. So this is the call handling layer from the safeguarding training point of view. We had some issues in both EAC and one-on-one that managed to bring up their compliance level quite significantly, but simultaneously as a result of a sort of big bang approach to training for the better standard we undertook a number of years ago in EAC. We've seen quite a rapid drop off of compliance in EAC, so we've got plans away to get that back up rapidly, but also to make sure we don't find ourselves in a position in 3 years' time that finds a number of people who do the same training or same circumstance. Just finally, from an EAC QA point of view, we continue to maintain good levels of 909 call auditing. We are still in the reduced number of call audits that were expected to produce a result of COVID, but we're confident that we're doing enough so that when we do go back to the pre-COVID expectation levels, we're in a good position not to suddenly find ourselves not following and we remain in good standings in the rest of the central excellence.
So on this full auditing process, and what we've just picked up in the patient story this morning, was you might do absolutely fine for passing the standards of the audit and totally miss the point about the patient. Is there something that we can do about changing the compliance that we have to follow in the audit, but about asking all the auditors to sit back and having listened to it all? Do they think we got the right outcome for the patient as part of the process?
Yeah, we can certainly look at that, and the team will also look at what they would describe as customer service as well, and make sure that there will be forms which tick tick the audit side of it off from a clinical point of view, but actually then that being the fact that the tone of voice wasn't right, or perhaps they didn't pick up on something that they should explore. So I think I'll get the team to do a bit more work in that department. And I think there's something about what you said earlier, Fernanda, as well, about identifying those complex forms, which wouldn't necessarily change the audit process. So the answer is yes, I think so.
And part of the work also is around how we support the managers and other jobs for those people, and also the dispatchers. To be able to lead, because they are less regulated by the NPDS process, and actually that's why they're more experienced, can use that extra knowledge to be able to get that right. So we'll take it away and come back at the next back.
And I think you're coming over time. Run algorithms that will identify, frequently used words, that might be calling you for the second time and calling you for the third time. Start to service those through technology that will give you a much quicker, visible view as to what is occurring and where might there be some pain points across how people are dealing with the form, or how it's being received by the person who's actually making a call. Yeah, Barry, there's
part of the problem with audit at the moment is that you're only auditing a very low percentage of course of compliance with EDS. So you're looking at probably around about 1 to 2% of total calls.
Yeah.
What we're currently doing is we're talking to our recording company, Redbox, who've just been bought out by an AI company that now do 100% audit, and they can actually run through all the calls across the recorder, looking for keywords, looking for tone, texture, and all sorts of other things as alerts to actually draw your attention to those calls. So the complex type calls would be relatively easy to identify within that.
that would save you a huge amount.
Yeah.
That's service those things. But how do we take that?
We are taking forward. So what we're trying to do at the moment is we're training their system. We're about to go into training of their system. So we're trying to link in with Jackie to give them a set of our recordings that's anonymized, so that they can use that to train their system, and then we can start testing it against real live data in the background. But to be honest, it's all there. And it's just a question of us actually putting that in place. So they already do it in a number of organisations, and they're already in discussion with a number of other ambulance services at the moment. So it's a national work that's going on.
Yeah, it was a separate point. I just wanted to ask about the number of policies in date. So we've got, I think, 48% that aren't in date, if I'm reading that correctly, which seems high.
It is high. It has improved since this report. We're now up to 38% not in date. I think even for the executive, we need to do a bit of a deep dive into why some policies have been out of date for some time. I don't think it's just because people are slow to update them. I think we've got actually some interdependencies of sort of meetings within meetings that need to be looked at to make sure that they haven't become a break. I'm particularly thinking of some of the staff approval processes. The staff approval processes, because there's a number of policies which would be in date, or will be in date once they've gone through the staff cell. And I don't know if there's particular issues which is probably not putting it all onto the staff side. There are some other examples as well, but I just think we need to get up to where we want to be in 19%. We need to understand some of the interdependencies which is holding back.
Anything further on that? If not, thank you, Jackie. Move on to the quality account.
Thank you very much. So the quality account for 22-23 is presented to the board statement of approval. There may be some final data checks before it goes to Coles, but most of those are complete now, I think. So the draft content has been shared already with chairs of our LAS Patient Public Council, provided a statement which is within the reports. It's also been shared with the stakeholders as required by the National Health Service regulations and Commissioners Health Watch and the Opening Scrutiny Committee. So the report provides an update on progress against the priorities which we set ourselves for last year, presents the priorities for next year, which is already approved. We have now received the statement from our commissioners, and that's been just in place in the library for colleagues to have a look at. Obviously, that will be put into the final report. From the point of view of our quality accounts and priorities which we set ourselves for last year, we set ourselves some points. Sort of tough targets from last year. I think it's fair to say that with everything that happened in the last year, we didn't achieve absolutely everything we set out to achieve. So we've completed about 50% of those priorities. The remaining priorities are being carried through into this financial year in various guises. So some of them very explicitly as part of our new setting of quality priorities. Some of those as part of other business as usual channels. So that's probably about all I wanted to sort of pull out. I'll take the rest of the report as read. So as I said, it is presented here for approval of the thing to the executive committee.
Thank you. Any questions for?
Just to say, just for any transparency, Jackie and I just exchanged emails. There were a couple of things that I just was asking about, and I think Jackie, you're going to take forward just a couple of tables, maybe just to the non-clinical person, just maybe explain them clearly. So it's not, there was nothing major, but just to say that that's.
Thank you for doing that. So lots of votes.
Yeah.
Right, Ronald, please.
Thanks, Andy. Just one question, Jackie. Commissioner statements, we're used to seeing them from North East London and South East London, but I'm just wondering whether in the context of our pan-London provision, are we going broader? Are we going to get more feedback from some of our other ICS partners?
So the quality report has been shared with all of our ICS providers via our CQRG meeting. It's only North West London that are providing a statement this year. We've got a statement from LASPPT. We haven't received a statement back from Health Watch or the overview and scrutiny committee, but that's the same as last year.
But are we looking to go broader?
Oh, outside of London?
No. Other partners.
No.
So I think what Ron was asking is, so North West London's response is on behalf of all five ICSs.
Okay.
So they taken it and gathered all the feedback and then responded on behalf of us as our lead commissioner.
It's been a group called CQRG, which all of the ICSs go to.
So we only delivered half of what we said we were going to do in this year. The quality priorities for the year we're now in, we decided to join up the quality account setting process with the business planning process, so that we've ended up, we think now for the year we're in, with quality account priorities that's aligned with what we need to do to deliver a whole heap of other things like our 25 million pound investment plan to improve CAT 2. We've got the quality aspect of those things in the quality account, the performance aspect in the service plan. So I'm more confident this year we're going to deliver it all because we're now pointing everything in the same set of directions, as opposed to having a very, very broad portfolio of things we're going to do all at once.
I think that's really good. I've seen this before. A multiplicity of different things, which is not easy to explain to the staff. It's very good. That's very, very good. Any questions for that? If not, we are asked to approve. Do we approve? Yes. Do we approve? Thank you so much. Huge amount of work. Really well done. Thank you. Right, business plan.
Okay, so the paper that you've got, I think I'll just draw a couple of things. The first thing is just to draw your attention and invite any reflections on the review of last year's business plan, which is the second half of the document. Just to remind colleagues, we set 10 priorities during for the last year, which was a bit of a segue, I think it's fair to say, from our previous strategy into the new strategy. And we've assessed how we did on all of those. it's not, we haven't achieved everything that we set out to do. Particularly, it was a really tough year. It's important to remember the amount of stuff that was going on over that particular period. But there were challenges on waiting times in particular. But I would say that I think it tells a story of an organisation that has not only dealt with the many challenges it's faced, but has also strengthened itself for the future in terms of thinking about our strategy, our estates, our IT, our workforce and our culture. And we've made progress in all of those different areas and started to prepare ourselves for the long term as well as developing as well as dealing with the immediate. So that's it. So we can invite any reflections on that. The main thing we want to get approved is the business plan for 23-24, which is the first half of the paper. This is aligned to the three core missions that we intend to have in our year strategy that, as you will recall, have been built from extensive engagement with our patients, our partners and our staff. They focus on three big areas: our care, our organisation, and our contribution to the health of the capital. And they reflect, in this first year of delivery towards our new strategy, they reflect many of the priorities that people have identified through that process, including improving the care or improving care on heart attacks, strokes, cardiac arrests, and being better at picking up the views of patients, the work we need to do on culture, on EDI, and a whole range of other areas. So my request is, were any reflections on 22-23 and to approve the business plan for 23-24.
Questions? I think a lot of this looks good, it's sensible in the context of the strategy that we've been discussing. I guess, given our conversation earlier, there's nothing explicit in here about possible handover delays. And in the reflection on the year before, we sort of say, we've done a lot, we've delivered it, and now we're waiting to see the benefits from 23-24. I don't know if that feels quite in line with the early conversation around how this is probably feels like the biggest risk to our achieving our improved performance on performance target during the year. So I guess question mark, should there be something, does it make sense to have something explicit in the business plan around continuing to tackle very good point. Populations.
It's a very good observation. So what we have got as the performance section is deliver CAS 2 mean 30 minutes, which there are a huge number of actions that go with delivering that, where one of them is clearly sort out the handover phase. So we could write a further sentence next to it, which says to do this requires the recruitment of productivity, handover phase, as a summary of the plan. Or we could put in another specific objective about handover phase. I would be happy to either think of what you guys wanted. That was the right thing to our people.
Or you could make it explicit risk in the BAF for 23-24 delivery of CAT 2 performance.
But it's that's all right.
But yeah, really big it up.
Yeah. Yes, they do that.
Because it's not actually ours to reduce.
I mean,
Given that conversation earlier.
yeah. I think I'd like to see it on the face of the client, really.
But Anne's point is, it's not an objective we can deliver. The system can deliver it for us.
Yeah.
So which is what there's a big risk to delivery of CAT 2 as opposed to something we set ourselves. That's an all things, isn't it?
Does it sit on anyone's performance? Does it sit on the ICS in queues? Anyone?
I'd like to hope so.
Yeah.
Checking it's.
I was just saying, we all
Yeah.
talk about it, and I keep wondering, well, where is it then? You know, because it's the number one issue when I go out there.
We
Could
could
I
always
just
make
make
one
an observation?
Huh?
Well, two observations, if I may.
Yeah.
And I think we've had the conversation before where we do have risks, we do have objectives, which aren't solely dependent on our action, but we often deliver things in partnership, don't we? And secondly, we did have a bit of a discussion yesterday at EXCO in the context of the fact of the extent to which you have an overarching theme like is in C2 and the extent you break it out. So hospital handover is really a C2 agency, but so is recruitment and retention. So you could break these things out. And at the moment, if you look at the map, it is broken. We do have risks around retention, we do have risks around handover. So you can organise it in different ways. Well, I guess for clarity, you might want some disaggregation.
Because if you look at it, as you say, you've got the call answer in Cat 1, Cat 2, it's almost like, that's an addendum to it, it's an integral part of it, it's that fix the handouts.
Yes.
I think Amit's point is right, this is what we talk about, it's hard to explicitly see.
It is implicitly in there, but it will be
Yes, it is.
easy to say, this including, sort of influencing handover delays, doing it.
It is a bit of a drive, isn't it, for everyone involved in this at every level of negotiation. It should be, the performance should be right up.
So we crystallise what our role is in reducing handover delays then.
So our role would be conveyors only the appropriate payment to any in the first place.
Yeah.
Agree an escalation process when we can't hand over. Do our best to help the hospitals hand over by doing cohorting. But also have a very clear set of expectations that we can leave when we've been there for a period of time. But in the performance section, what we have been specifically required to deliver of the three performance metrics we've listed here, that's what we are going to be measured on. And when we don't, if we don't deliver, have been voted this for Cat 2, the answer, the question is going to be why haven't you? Then they're going to look, well, did MAS do the things that were in its control for the Cat 2, or was it another part of the system's responsibility? So I kind of think it's more likely, I'm quite confident we know what we need to deliver. But if we don't deliver it, it will be because of the handover space. So it will definitely feature in how you report. And that's why I think the suggestion that actually the best place to put it is the big risk of that feels right.
Yes, there's an internal and external signaling thing as well, right? And if you're explicit about it, if it's the thing that staff are finding most difficult, and then we sort of read into the business plan and figure it out in the future. There's both internally and externally, there's an argument to say, look, we know this issue, we're going to continue to work with our partners. Our role needs to be specific there, but it is important that we recognise that both internally to us and also in our external conversations.
So is it both?
Maybe both and both, right?
Have it on here.
Yeah.
We're contributing to the reduction.
And just as you've got the other lines, you've got a few extra lines. You can explain this in the back and you can explain what it is we're trying to do. Okay? Yeah, other than that, which we look forward to that, other than that, we all agree with this.
Can I ask a better question? In terms of the review of last year, effectively, I think essentially we delivered 50% of what we committed.
Or more.
Well, I'm just doing the maths, So, I mean, obviously, all commitments are
Fully delivered.
fully delivered.
And
Yeah.
partially delivered.
So I guess my question is how have you judged the leadership capacity and the organisation's capacity to deliver this?
So we did do that very explicitly. So in the plan for this year, we started with a bigger list than we ended up with. We spent a long time with EXCO saying, what can we not do? And we took out quite a lot of things. But as you can see, we're still left with a pretty long list of things we say we're going to do. Because this year, it is pretty granular about the specifics. I think that we can actually do this. And a huge amount of it is already in progress. And the document we next need to do is the milestones for each quarter about
what we want to do with each of these in each quarter, because it's quite clear that quite a lot not going to start in the second half of the year. Team speaking, but I think we think this is a doable list of things. It's massively ambitious, but we kind of want to set the organisation that this is we've done a lot of foundations, and there are a lot of things that should now enable us to do more than we've been able to do before, because we've got a much deal of leadership team that we started with. Other views?
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of them are also linked. And so actually, if you do, they're not buying, so if you do one and then they link, there are big ones like fixed basic app productivity on slide 261, which are absolutely linked together, because if you get if we through Rakesh's program finish, because most of it's already in trade, the basics work, because there's so much work's already gone on there. The productivity improves and you reduce the lost time, which in my view is where we should add started shift on scene time and hospital handovers into that sentence, because actually that then highlights it, but doesn't make it the other things are already covering the referrals for alternative pathways.
Yeah, thanks.
I was supportive for Fernando just said. I think as we went through this Exco, Dan was right, there was more on there. I think we'd welcome board challenging this. There was more that can come off, but we got to the point of actually these are all things we've got to do this year, and they are highly interlinked. So we had more capacity by taking some off, but I think we got to the point at Exco that we need to do all of this stuff and we need to do it this year.
Anything else?
I just had another question, just in terms of, as you guys have thought through, the agenda looking forward and work we have to, are there any capabilities that you identify that you need to strengthen? And I'm thinking of things like, anything that touches our staff. We talked earlier about, buddying up with our staff and continue to embed change, but are there things like that that's cut across everything you do that you need to think about bolstering capability in certain areas, whether it's embedding change, whether it's integrating various aspects of work, whether it's having a constant listening to our staff and feeding that back in. Just wondered if you could help us anything come up.
I think that's a really good question too. So I think we've identified two. So one is quality improvement, where we know we need to do it. Currently, it sits with Jackie over there, bundles up with a huge number of other things, and we're not giving it attention. So we have got to get the QI. It's got to have a much higher profile, and we've got to get more people with the expertise to do it. Then a key part of QI is actually having information. I think what Barry is helping us identify is that on business information team needs to be much more linked to operations, so that we're actually producing the information that we need to make better decisions. Because we're applying, not quite blind, but not with the right information. And then there's actually the third one is the recognition area, where I think there should have been both your infrastructure for delivering all the clinical non-support services is the first time I think in LAS we probably invested in good leaders for all those things, and they're massive enablers for other bits of the organisation. And our finance knowledge of all our managers isn't very high, which is why I guess it's got a massive program going on of training people and budgeting in the NHS.
Thanks, Barry. Anything else? Oh, Ron, thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Well, two comments really. Just one, there's a lot here. And secondly, thinking about the integrated performance report and how we're going to measure things. Some are quite good, easy to do because they're quantitative. There's quite a lot here that's also qualitative. So I'm just wondering how the exec are thinking about presenting this to the board as a performance dashboard.
So we're happy to do the same as we did last year. It's a quarterly report for each of these. How are we doing against tracking against milestones? But we haven't yet shown you the milestones for each thing. But that's our plan of how to show you.
What route does that take?
go with Exco here, and also Exo straightening. It's like every single morning subcommittee, yeah, it's a bit.
We put in the milestones for each quarter next step. We have a quarterly review process that comes in, that goes to Exco, and we tie up the link with the back. So it's in terms of risk. So it's that's what we did last year. I think it's fair to say as we did that last year, the organisation got a little bit more used to the process as we kind of went through it. After a bumpy start. So it's sort of like, I think it's starting to get a bit more mature as a process.
Thank you. Anything else on that? If not, do we approve?
Yeah.
Subject to yes.
Subject to that.
Yeah, fine, good, well done, thank you very much. Thanks for that. Board assurance.
So this is the last run out of the 22-23 board assurance. It's been through the assurance committee, so there shouldn't be anything in here which is a surprise to anyone. And as you can see, there's a number of risks that have reduced. Probably of more significance is the 23-24. And just a word about the process for that. Yesterday we took full draft 23-24 back to Exco, and we made a number of changes to refresh and update it. What we decided that needs to happen next is a discussion next week where we go through the business plan for the year and just cross-check the business plan with the back entries. Make sure we've captured everything which is significant strategic risk. We'll then write up that and take it to the next round of all assurance committees. It then comes back here to sign off by the full board in July. That's what I want to say.
Any questions?
Ask a question, please. So the EDI, some of these risks going to transfer to it?
Yes, so I think we agreed particularly the one around diversity, 5B.
Yeah.
With EDI, I don't know if you feel there's any
Yeah.
others.
That's the one I.
Any questions further on that?
So there's one bit of clarification in how we're timing of all this. So we set the backlog to be quarterly updates. Our subcommittees don't actually meet quarterly, they often meet more frequently. So what we decided yesterday, just to check out with you, is that when the back comes to your subcommittee, the score will be the score that is the current at the time of your subcommittee. So that whilst it, because otherwise we're getting into it, we go to a conflict on some of the subcommittees last time, that the score you're looking at it really seems to relate to the time of your subcommittee.
So it's in arrears also.
No, so when you're at your subcommittee, you will see what we currently think the score is.
Oh, okay.
Real
As in.
of that risk, so that so it's real.
Yeah, we'll keep the historic quarterly scores, so you can see what it was at the end of the preceding quarter, but then there'll be a column, which is, this is our view of the current risk score.
And we'll see that.
That'll be in the next iteration of the pack that you'll see in July.
Everybody happy? If so, thanks very much. Well done for what goes into that. We've got AOB, and data next meeting is on there. We've got questions from the public. We do have a question. Has no question been circulated?
No, it hasn't.
Right, that's right.
I was intending to read them out and then give them.
Please, over to you then.
So they're from Malcolm Alexander, who is on Hackney Health Watch and chair of his own education for ESET related to us. So the questions go, when will the board return to providing monthly performance packs so the public can observe how effectively the LAS is operating? Will the board commit to providing monthly information about their environmental performance to ensure equity of response to all emergency couples? What plans does the LAS have to increase the number of ambulances and paramedic staff to ensure the LAS can meet contractual targets and return mandates to the emergency departments to 15 minutes? By when does the LAS expect to eradicate over 60-minute handover delays? And what action is the LAS taking to achieve greater alignment of their 111 service with primary care, provide access to more effective clinical assessment, and the expansion of 111 into urgent care services and other appropriate alternative pathways? So quite a basket of issues, many of which we've covered in the conversations today. So we are not intending to produce a monthly performance information pack. The performance reports that we produce come to the board at the time when the board meets. NHS England produce a monthly data pack of ambulance response times. We will take back to consider whether we would produce borough level information, but our current view is we are a London-wide service. Our data is reported for London, and we give that information to our ICSs. But we will review whether we think there is merit to producing borough level information. We have a big plan to increase the number of ambulances and paramedic staff this year. So last year was our biggest recruitment drive ever, and this year is going to be even bigger too. And we are determined to meet the contractual commitment we've been given, which is set out in the objectives for a 10-second call answer remain a 7-minute count 1 and a 30-minute count 2. We love ED handovers to all be at 15 minutes, but now we revert to conversations today about how we want to be able to get closer to that. And we'd love to eradicate all over 60-minute handover delays, so we're with you on that one. And on the 111 services, yes, we have been having a series of conversations with primary care in recent weeks about how we can align 111 much more closely to primary care so that it feels more seamless to patients when they want urgent care rather than emergency care.
Right on, thank you, Chairman. Any questions on Daniel's response to the questions?
How will Mr. Alexander know we've answered the questions?
Well, because hopefully this is recorded, doesn't mean you can play it. Unless we want to.
Is it recorded?
Yes.
Okay, and I skipped over any other brief, so we can do that one first. Any other business? Colleagues? If not, again, can I thank Daniel and the team for really nice work? And I always say every time, don't we? But it sends out exceptionally challenging events, so that you've had to deal with. So thank you so much for everything you do to get us to grow this. If there's nothing else, we look forward to seeing the next meeting of this board, which is the 20th of June. That's the board meeting.
Thank you all.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye, Robin.